In LO6 here we're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, reproduction. At the level of cells, we can reproduce cells using a process called mitosis, and we just looked at that in LO5. At the level of an organism, though, how do we make a new organism? There are two different methods. There's asexual and sexual reproduction. Some organisms can use both. Asexual reproduction, we're basically going to use mitosis, whereas sexual reproduction combines mitosis and meiosis. And we'll look at the steps of meiosis in the next video, but in this one we're going to compare asexual versus sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction tends to happen in small organisms. You don't need sperm and egg in order to make reproduction occur asexually. Again, as I just mentioned in the last slide, it uses the process of mitosis, so it's pretty simple. I'll go through the four types of asexual reproduction shortly, but first, the advantages. So what is the advantage of not needing sperm and egg and just being able to reproduce asexually? First of all, it's very fast, and you only need one parent. This would be like a bacterium that just divides in half, and each new piece becomes a new bacteria. Very fast, only one parent needed. Because it's fast and only one parent is needed, you don't need a lot of energy. It's a pretty simple process. However, a disadvantage of asexual reproduction is that you're only cloning the organism. There is no genetic variation. So if one of the organisms get a mutation, that mutation gets passed on over and over and over to each clone. Now think of something being very susceptible to disease. Let's say there's a mutation that allows it to get some disease that will kill it. Well, that means if the disease ends up in the population, all of those cloned cells are going to die because none of them have the chance to be unique to survive. The four methods of asexual reproduction. First, we have budding. The picture below is of a hydra, and a hydra can simply bud a new piece off of its own body, and then that will become an offspring that breaks off and goes on its own. Second is called fragmentation, and this is when an actual physical part of the organism breaks off. You can see in the picture below it's called a planaria or a flatworm. The planaria can break into multiple pieces, and each new piece will become a new planaria. The third method of asexual reproduction is called binary fission. This is basically mitosis. You see an amoeba below. The amoeba just divides into two, and each new half becomes an identical amoeba to what we started with. The fourth way is called parthenogenesis, and this one's kind of weird. It is along the lines of sexual reproduction in that you have a sperm and an egg. However, the egg doesn't get fertilized. A sperm never fertilizes it, and it still develops. This happens in many insects, for example, bees. If eggs are made and they do not get fertilized, the eggs turn into males. If the eggs do get fertilized, they become female workers or a queen. The other process is called sexual reproduction, and this tends to happen in more complex organisms. This occurs with the union of gametes. Gametes are sperm and egg. We're going to use the process of meiosis, followed by mitosis, and we'll talk about meiosis soon. Advantages of sexual reproduction. The big advantage is that we are mixing up DNA from two parents. So we're getting variation, we're getting genetic uniqueness, which may allow something to adapt and survive better in an environment than its precursors. The disadvantages, you can see that this is flipped from asexual reproduction. It takes more energy, more time, and two organisms are required. Needing two organisms can be a disadvantage because sometimes the organisms might be in an environment where it's hard to reach each other, and therefore that would prevent sexual reproduction. So in that sort of situation, only needing one parent would be an advantage. There is only one way to go about sexual reproduction, as opposed to the four different ways we just discussed for asexual. In terms of sexual reproduction, each parent supplies a gamete, so the female supplies an egg, and the male supplies a sperm. The gametes, when they meet up, fuse. The nucleus of each gamete, because these are cells, combines and begins to develop into a new organism. Each gamete, now we talked about these words before, has half of a normal cell's genetic material. It's haploid. If you look in the picture below, very simple diagram, a diploid cell has the normal amount of DNA, the double number. Haploid cells have half. So in meiosis, sperm and egg have half the amount of DNA that a body cell of that organism would. In humans, our body cells are autosomes, have 46 chromosomes, but sperm and egg only have 23. This makes sense, so when sperm and egg combine, the total number is 46, because the two fuse and the DNA combines. You wouldn't want 46 chromosomes in an egg and 46 in a sperm, because when those combine, then the new organism would now have 92 chromosomes instead of 46, and that could cause some genetic issues. When the sperm and egg combine, we form what's called a zygote, so the DNA combines between the two, and then the zygote continues to make copies of itself by mitosis, and then those cells can differentiate or become specialized, we talked about that before, to make a new organism. That wraps up LO6, reproduction. Check in your note packet for what's coming up next. You have a worksheet that's going to go back a section, and then after this we'll look at the steps of meiosis and how we actually go about forming sperm and egg.